including such topics as game art, games in cinema, and games in literature. Game preservation, exhibition, and documentation, including the place of museums, libraries, and collectors in preparing game history. And material histories of game artifacts and ephemera. Henry Lowood, Stanford University. Rayford Gwynn, Indiana University, Bloomington. Preface. The very first edition of Dungeons & Dragons credits two people on its cover, E. Gary Gygax and David L. Arneson. As the game appeared well within living memory and quickly found its place in popular culture, it should be straightforward to say what exactly those two people had to do with its creation and popularization. With the half-century anniversary of D&D's 1974 release approaching, this pen-and-paper tabletop game is, to the surprise of nearly everyone, more popular and influential than ever, which makes its genesis a subject of growing interest. But sometimes, circumstances conspire to make even recent history difficult to recover. Part of the problem is that the events leading up to the publication of D&D did not seem especially momentous at the time. The process involved only a handful of people working within an esoteric hobby, which left little by the way of paperwork and few memorable moments. It is hard to imagine a project less obviously destined for mainstream success than D&D, and the shock of its triumph did more to disturb its historical record than clarify it. Gygax and Arneson had a falling out a few years after the game's release, and their scuffle over money and credit kicked up dust that obscures the key historical particulars to this day. This book is the story of how D&D rose from its humble origins to become a pop culture phenomenon, and what that remarkable journey did to the people who made it. It does not focus on the innovations in game design of D&D, nor does it dwell on questions of who invented which concepts, except insofar as those details became part of the public or legal dispute over the game, which in a few cases they did. Listeners interested in game system evolution are directed to my book, Playing at the World, which was the starting point for much of the research here. Apart from the brief overview of the development process of D&D in Part 1, there remains nothing more than to reaffirm the sentiments expressed at the beginning of Playing at the World, that Gygax and Arneson were co-creators of D&D, in at least the crucial sense that Gygax would never have worked towards such a game without the inspiration of Arneson's vision, and Arneson would never have realized the publication of such a game without the structure that Gygax provided for it. When Gygax began to see signs that D&D would cross over into the mainstream, he famously compared his company TSR to a low-level character in D&D that would gain experience over the years and eventually level up to rival the likes of Milton Bradley or Parker Brothers. He saw business from the perspective of an adventurer progressing to endlessly greater heights of power, and he played that adventurer as if it were his own personal D&D character. His embattled years running TSR tick off with something of the regularity of game turns made up of phases. Like the summer gaming conventions, effectively the combat phase of each turn, or the winter upkeep phase of shareholder meetings and fiscal reports. The battle for D&D was perhaps most like a game of diplomacy, where a succession of warring powers form and dissolve alliances as they seek to conquer World War I-era Europe. And like in any diplomacy game, there are stabs, moments of betrayal where alliances collapse. The narrative from Part 2 forward thus follows that yearly turn structure, loosely, and hopefully not too intrusively. As the annals progress, this story depicts the flow of events as it appeared to people at the time, and whenever possible, as they described it contemporaneously. This is not to say that people always understood matters perfectly as they happened, but what they expressed had dramatic consequences for TSR and D&D. This story thus pays close attention to gossip, not for the sake of its accuracy, but rather for the role it played in shaping the perceptions of the broader hobby community. Within each chapter, we will endeavor to see things as they looked at the time, and to remain ignorant of the future.